Welcome, everyone. My name is Kaliroi Stavrianou, and on behalf of Global Clinical Engineering Alliance, I'm very happy to moderate this series of webinars. Those webinars aim to educate, promote collaboration, and also promote information exchange about healthcare technology, engineering, and patients' outcomes. All our webinars are recorded, archived, and also live streamed on Facebook. Following the completion of the webinar, the recording material will be accessible on our website, www.globalcea.org. Please note that at the bottom of your screen, you have a Q&A button where you can submit questions to the faculty that will be addressed towards the end of the webinar. In addition, for posting general comments, there is option of the chat box for the audience interaction. Today's webinar is the fourth in the series with title, What Must a Clinical Engineer Know Regarding Digital Health? Now I'm very pleased to give the floor to my colleague, Rosanna Rivas, who is moderating this webinar. Rosanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kali. Good afternoon, good morning, good night, all. My name is Rosanna Rivas, Clinical Engineer and Consultant at WHO Collaborating Center for Health Technology Management. Digital health is now engaged in diverse levels to healthcare services and health innovation efforts among the world. The population has never been more aware about digital health value. In addition, the demand for health solutions based in digital health is increasing since 2020. I am pleased to moderate such interesting GCEA webinar and introduce now Stephen Grimes. Stephen Grimes, over 40 years experience working with independent service organizations, academic medical centers, and enterprises. He recently co-authored AMI's Medical Device Cybersecurity Guide for Health Technology Management Professionals and teaches a graduate-level engineering course in medical device cybersecurity at the University of Connecticut. He is a fellow of Healthcare Information and Management Systems Society, the Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation, and the American Institute of Medical and Biological Engineering, and the American College of Clinical Engineering, where he is also a past president. It's my pleasure to give the floor to Stephen Grimes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rosanna. And I am attempting to share a screen, okay, there we go. Thank you. And I want to thank the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance for this opportunity to present to you today. I've been asked to speak on the evolution of digital health and what our clinical engineering profession must know and do to remain relevant in these changing times. So I broke my presentation into three sections. First, I'll speak to you about the evolution of digital health and some of the forces that have been driving that evolution. Next, I'll speak on the implications the evolution of digital health has on our clinical engineering roles and what we must do to remain relevant. And next, and then finally, I'll take a couple of slides to summarize key points of this presentation. So first, looking at digital health, we see that over the past 30 years, the evolution of increasingly computerized and connected systems has led to the evolution of hybrid systems. That is, systems that included not only medical technology, but have also included and incorporated elements of information technology and telecommunications technologies. Because the overlap in traditional clinical engineering and information technology support services is often not seamless, this poses a particular challenge because it's often not clear whether a particular problem or an issue that we're dealing with is related to medical technology elements of a system or related instead to the information technology or telecommunications technology. It's also a challenge for clinicians and healthcare providers who are having technical issues because it's not often clear whether they should contact clinical engineering or information technology for assistance. And frankly, it's not a choice we should be asking clinicians or healthcare practitioners to make. The graphic here is designed to illustrate how technology has driven the practice of medicine. For most of human history, healthcare technology was based on the approach illustrated here, where at this level 0, you've got a diagnosis that's based on the medical practitioner's observation combined with the practitioner's accumulated knowledge. And ultimately, the treatment is based on the practitioner's knowledge and their ability to apply simple tools and medicine. So again, you can see the flow of information flowing clockwise. As time's advanced, and in recent human history, like over the past 100 years, healthcare practitioners have had access to specialized tools to help diagnosis and treatment. So we've, of course, had things like the advent of things as simple as stethoscopes. We've had X-rays and so on. So the technology, we begin to get additional tools. And so healthcare was slightly better, but it was still great, generally limited to each practitioner's knowledge. At level 2, in the more recent times, in recent decades, healthcare has improved diagnostic and therapeutic tools, but also began to have access to decision support and expert systems to augment the practitioner's own knowledge. And finally, at level 3, what we're beginning to see going into the future is better decision support and expert systems, along with better diagnostic and therapeutic technologies that will greatly amplify the practitioner's capability, making many of these care decisions more automatic and consequently free from human error. Think of the education, or think of rather of the evolution of the automated external defibrillator, and in a non-medical industry, the self-driving automobile. In each case, the technology is such as it involves minimal operator intervention, and minimal operator intervention is necessary in these cases. So over the past 30 years, healthcare technology has grown considerably more complex and software-based. As we move into the future, medical technology continues to evolve. Most medical device manufacturers today will admit that they're becoming primarily software developers. Whenever possible, more medical data and processing and storage will be moving from local devices and networks up into the cloud. The reason for this migration is the potential for greater efficiency, increased availability to users, regardless of their location, better management, better security, and better backup of the information. After moving data processing and storage to the cloud, the remaining hardware for many medical devices will be like the slim clients we used to see in information technology. It will largely be diagnostic sensors and therapeutic actuators with the patient. This timeline illustrates the evolution of health technology. Health technology is increasingly computerized, full-featured systems, increasingly connected systems, including diagnostic systems that are connected directly to the therapeutic systems. Increasingly, we're seeing they're complex and they're smart systems taking advantage of cloud services to provide greater access. Some of the benefits of this evolution include the ability to centrally manage connected systems, to include faster and more reliable care due to access to intelligent systems with more data, includes more intelligent technical systems that have the ability to self-configure themselves, do self-diagnosis, and will do self-repair. Some of the challenges we're seeing is that the increased complexity requires different types of support in order to maintain their effectiveness. The potential for increasing the number of vulnerabilities and also single points of failure. Over the past 30 years, we've also begun to see a move to more diverse healthcare delivery modes and venues. We're moving more rapidly to telehealth, most recently driven by the COVID pandemic. We're also developing and deploying new technologies that will enable us to deliver healthcare in other venues, like at home, at work, in school, and while we're traveling. One particularly interesting aspect of the COVID pandemic is that, among other things, it's accelerated many trends that already existed in society, including trends in healthcare delivery. The pandemic has accelerated the move toward telemedicine. Many of the previous impediments, often legal impediments to telemedicine, have largely been removed. Another accelerated trend has been increased improvements in remote monitoring and examination capabilities, improvements in home treatment using these new technologies, and things like robotics. We're also seeing improvements in remote device management, including remote updates, patch applications, or application of patches, activity logs, and troubleshooting. Examples of some of the evolving technology driving the future of digital health include robotics, 3D imaging, telecommunications, remote monitoring, micro and nanotechnologies, individualized medicine, including genomics, connected systems of systems, and cloud-based solutions, including the Internet of Medical Things and 5G technologies, clinical decision support systems and expert systems, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and augmented reality. Connected technologies and nanotechnologies will enable us to diagnose and treat areas we previously couldn't access because of distance or other physical limitations. Things like 3D printing and genomics will enable us to diagnose and customize much more effective treatments than were previously available to us. So in the next few slides, we'll review some of the significant implications the evolution of digital health has on clinical engineering. This graphic's meant to summarize the previous points made with, and first is with new technology, there is a need for new services and new tools, which in turn requires new support roles to develop new knowledge, skills, and abilities. Let me begin here by stating what I believe should be an obvious fact. That is, healthcare technology management services and clinical engineering roles must be a function of technology. That means when we're dealing with new medical technology, as that technology evolves, the nature of clinical engineering support services, including support professional roles, must also evolve to remain relevant. From a technology standpoint, the principal drivers in the past and near future include increasing convergence of the technologies, particularly those related to medical information and telecommunications, and increasing technology complexity. Today we have not just technical systems, but often the evolution of systems. Medical technologies, like so many other technologies we deal with today, have become smarter and more software-based. What does this mean for those who support these technologies, that is, the clinical engineering professionals? It means their roles must evolve and change corresponding to the evolution in technology. We need to recognize old approaches to support traditional technologies don't necessarily work for the new technologies. And we also need to recognize that the rate of change means that clinical engineering professionals must prepare for continuous education if they're going to remain relevant. So in this chart, we look at the evolution of digital health and its increasing capability and complexity over time. We compare the evolution of digital health with the trajectory of clinical engineering's evolution, and they've remained reasonably consistent on parallel up to this point. But up to today, again, we've remained on track. However, the new technology evolution is now becoming a hockey stick. We're seeing the technology, the convergence and the evolution of technology is rapidly increasing. However, the current trajectory of the clinical engineering is woefully inadequate to meet the needs of the new digital health or the digital health of tomorrow. We need to do a trajectory reset, a rapid course change, if we're to have any hope of being relevant and providing adequate support in the future. So that means seriously looking at the kinds of services we're providing, and are they truly meeting the needs of our, the healthcare needs, and the needs related to the technology we intend to support. So in this scenario pictured here, we have an engineering technician who's servicing a medical device. Traditionally, the field engineering technicians have remotely accessed service experts like the manufacturer over the phone to obtain service assistance. Increasingly, organizations are using teleservicing via the internet to conduct remote diagnostics and troubleshooting. This also includes software updates and patching via remote access. We're beginning to see the use of advanced technical support between remote service experts and the field engineering technicians using augmented reality, where the field engineering technician becomes essentially the eyes and the hands of the remote service expert. Another trend accelerated by the COVID pandemic is how clinical engineering professionals obtain their education and training. Typically, of course, it's through colleges and university education, operations and technical training, and through conferences and professional development. All of this now is beginning to, these sources of training, have begun to transform to online services, and need to transform to online services to meet the needs of the community, because we're not going to be able to, it won't suffice to rely on your 4 or 6 years or so of education, your engineering education, followed by occasional technical training or an occasional conferences. You're going to need to constantly, in order to be able to address that hockey stick curve that we saw, you're going to need to make education through these forums part of your routine if you're going to remain relevant. So finally, I'll take a couple of slides to summarize the key points I've tried to make. In the future, medical and information technology will continue to evolve in ways that blur old concepts. Examples of this include the question of when is a device a computer, and or when is it software? When is it a medical device? Often we're dealing with that kind of ambiguity now. Increasingly, some of the even things like our iPhones, our mobile phones, have the potential, or other devices, the Internet of Things, iPads and such, have the potential of being incorporated into a medical device. So when is it a medical device, and when do we need to treat it as one? Medical equipment manufacturers are increasingly focusing on developing software. Some of that will be designed for a hardware platform. It'll be hardware platform agnostic. That is, it will be able to run on a variety of hardware platforms. and the future of clinical data analysis and storage is in the cloud. Rapid technology innovations will place increasing burdens on regulators who are challenged to regulate effectively without stifling innovation. And it is a significant challenge because the old ways, just as the old ways of providing clinical engineering and technical support are changing, the old ways of regulating must change as well, because they don't fit the current accelerated development of new technologies. Healthcare providers who may be financially constrained but who want new technologies in order to effectively compete for new business are going to be burdened as well. And also existing clinical engineering and information technology infrastructures will be burdened. They must learn to collaborate. They must acquire new tools, and they must learn to prioritize in order to address the greatest risk that they hope to support these new technologies. In this brief summary, there is a brief summary of steps here the clinical engineering community needs to consider in their course reset. First is clinical engineering and information technology need to change their current trajectories if they're going to be in a position to support the new digital health technologies. They need to consider how to redefine their roles that were originally defined decades ago. So those roles are relevant to today and tomorrow's needs. They need to identify education and skills that will be necessary to move into those redefined roles. They need to work with the industry to define new guides and standards that facilitate collaboration between the various support services and to ensure that these future services meet the needs. So again, clinical engineering and IT and the telecommunications people need to work well together, as well as other stakeholders in the manufacturing. So that needs to be a focus of our future development. And then finally, we need to identify and work with other stakeholders in their organizations to further define effective roles and relationships. So for example, in the US, we need to work with stakeholders like the American College of Clinical Engineering and the Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation and the Healthcare Information and Management System Society and others as appropriate, WHO and such, to ensure that we're getting the support and they're providing effective support to the professional development. So thank you. That concludes my formal part of today's presentation.
Thank you very much for your amazing presentation, Steve. It is plenty of contents that for sure are an amazing invitation for the questions. Indeed, we have several questions for you, and we will take them at the end of the two presentations. Thank you very much. Now, I am going to present my next colleague and also expert in digital health. This is the time to present Ricardo Silva, native Venezuelan from who has worked in healthcare technology and innovation for more than 20 years. He is a biomedical and clinical engineering by training with a PhD in neurosciences. Ricardo has worked in development and implementation of health IT solutions in Latin America and in the US. He is professor of health information technology at Villanova University and senior consultant to the World Health Organization. It's my pleasure to introduce then Ricardo Silva. Go ahead, Ricardo.
Thank you, Rosana. And thank you, Steve, for the great introduction that you did to this topic. So following up with all of what you were saying, I'm going to talk a little bit about software as a medical device. You actually raised the question, what is and what is not a software as a medical device? So I expect to answer this question and hopefully some of the other questions that might be left in the air from your great introduction. So Callie Roy, you can go to the next. A lot of the information that I'm sharing here in this presentation today was taken from the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. In particular, there is the Software as a Medical Device Clinical Evaluation. It's a great guide for those of us, in my case in particular, who are developing software as a medical device and want to go through the process of accreditation of this software. So great resource for any of you that want to move in this direction. Next, Caliroy. So what is and what is not a software as a medical device? Like Steve said, most health devices today have a piece of software involved, attached, part of. In fact, most medical devices today are nothing more than an embedded computer with multiple sensors or actuators and a piece of software that makes everything work. However, this software is considered software in a medical device or software as part of a medical device. And it's not the same as software as a medical device. Software as a medical device is a standalone piece of software that resides somewhere else. Could be in a cell phone, could be in a wearable device, could be in a computer system, could be in the cloud. So it is software that is intended to interact with the health system at different levels and produce results that can be utilized by the health professionals to take action. So that is very important. This software by itself is the one that is serving the purpose of diagnosis, treatment, or follow-up of a particular health condition. Let's go to the next one. So in synthesis, software as a medical device is a collection of algorithms, logical rules, artificial intelligence that operates within a digital system and produces an output that will be used in a medical decision pathway. So software can feed from multiple sources of information. It could feed from evidence-based data. It could feed from previous studies that other researchers had made, developed into an algorithmic solution, and this solution added as part of an electronic health record for clinical decision support system, or added to a wearable device for monitoring of heart rate or diabetes. So diabetes trackers are software as a medical device that are measuring and keeping track of the glucose level of a type 2 diabetic. And then this tracking could be used to produce an actionable response. So the outputs of the software as a medical device help inform, drive, diagnose, or treat a health condition. Next one, Caliroy. Just like health devices in general, software as a medical device is classified in accordance to a risk categorization from level 1 to level 4. Here is both a table and a graph that describes how this categorization is obtained. So level 1 includes software that it's aimed towards non-serious conditions and that helps either inform or drive clinical decisions. So inform means we're providing data to the practitioner. The practitioner will decide what to do with this data. Whereas driving implies that the software is providing a guiding principle to orient a decision, a clinical decision support. When we go to treating or diagnosis, even if the case of a non-serious condition, that is considered a level 2 software as a medical device, and this level 2 software as a medical device takes action directly to either diagnose, determine what the condition is, or treat a particular health condition. So simple level 2 software as a medical device could be a tracking app for someone who's doing physical rehab. So this person is doing physical rehab and he or she needs to make X number of repetitions of a certain movement. We could have a software that is tracking these repetitions of the certain movement, and it's indicating to the patient whether they have completed the activity or not. And it could go all the way up to a level 4 critical pacemaker like or automatic cardiac defibrillator like Steve mentioned in his presentation. Next, Caliroy. So before a software as a medical device can be sold as such, before someone can claim that they have an actionable software as a medical device, it has to go through an evaluation and accreditation process through the FDA or any other accrediting body worldwide, just as any other medical device. The process needs to fulfill 3 goals. It needs to establish that there's a valid clinical association. It needs to validate analytically the accuracy of the device as is intended, and it needs to be validated clinically, meaning that the software actually works reliably within a clinical setting. This is not just a research tool that can be used offline for basic research and analytics. This is actually an actionable piece of technology that is going to be used to inform, support, or directly control a clinical intervention. So it needs to be validated within a clinical setting as part of a clinical trial. Next one, please, Caliroy. So a software as a medical device needs to go through a pre-market certification process, through a pre-market approval. Today, the United States and the World Health Organization have the emergency use authorization for the global pandemic of COVID. Within the emergency use authorization for the global pandemic of COVID, software has been included as one of those tools that can get fast-track pre-market approval through the emergency use authorization. That doesn't mean that we can just jump steps. All of the steps still need to be fulfilled. What the World Health Organization, FDA, and other organizations have provided is an on-ramp, is a fast track to get this software validated so that it can be used in preventing, diagnosing, or treating COVID as a health condition. Next. So the first thing is the valid clinical association. The manufacturer needs to provide evidence of the cause and effect relationship. This evidence can be provided by literature search, by guidelines, by best practices. It could be validated through secondary data analytics or by comparing to other established standards. So let's move to the next one to start giving you specific examples of each of the 3 types of validations. For the clinical validity, the software needs to be tested within the target population for which it is intended. So you need to provide a reference and your comparator. And you need to make sure that your software compares to the reference. This is an example. It's not something that I'm currently validating as a software as a medical device, but this is a paper I presented in the Global Clinical Engineering Conference just a month ago. And it is using artificial intelligence to predict how well or how would COVID evolve in a specific population. And here you can see how we compare the measured evolution of COVID in the different populations with the predicted evolution of COVID as provided by an artificial intelligence software. So this is a way to validate the clinical association. You have the measured, which is the true, and you have the software, which in this case is kind of like your experimental variable. So you have your control, you have your experimental variable, and you want to have them match with each other to have a valid clinical association. Let's move to the next one. What about the analytical technical validation? So we want to confirm that the software has been correctly built and that it meets the specifications that the user needs or intends to use. Again, this is another paper. Again, this is not a piece of software that we're in the process of validating as software as a medical device. Recent publication with a colleague of mine from the University of Guayaquil. And here we can see how an artificial neural network can be used to detect specific alterations within a chest X-ray that are conformant to manifestations of COVID-19. So here, this software piece could be utilized to support clinical decisions on the diagnosis of COVID-19 through chest X-rays. So what is the need? How does the software conform? Does the software fulfill the clinical needs? Let's go to the next one, Caliroy. This one is the clinical validation. And now this is an example of a software as a medical device that I'm currently working on the process of validating within the FDA. Here, this is a software as a medical device that is coupled to a lateral flow assay, essentially a rapid COVID test. And the idea is to allow the software from your cell phone to directly diagnose and read the result of the rapid COVID test and tell you whether you are COVID positive or not. This will report automatically to all of the different authorities, and it will help keep track of who is infected, who's not infected. It evaluates a multi-factor authentication to make sure that the person who is claiming the results is the person who's actually taking the test, and many other things. But what we can see here is comparing the performance of the software versus reference. In this case, the reference is a PCR comparator. So you're comparing the performance of a rapid COVID test versus the PCR comparator that it's assumed as the gold standard. And what you see is that the sensitivity is in the order of 97.8% and the specificity is in the order of 100%. That is very important because it's the only way that you can guarantee that your software is not providing you with false positive results and that you are not taking off work or other things like that when you actually do not need to do so. So this is the clinical validation of a software as a medical device. Let's go to the next one, Caliroy. Actually, the validation of a software as a medical device can be coupled very closely to the validation of an in vitro diagnosis device. So here we see what is the flow chart for clinical validation of an in vitro diagnostic, and you can see how the same steps are followed by the software as a medical device validation. So very close, still medical devices, they need to follow the same sort of protocols and process flows. Next one, Caliroy. So now let's go to what is more important for the clinical engineers, and it is the life cycle. The software gets approved and it goes into the market. Once in the market, you're going to have users making decisions, supporting decisions, by means of this particular software tool. Here is the post-market validation and follow-up. And here, this is a very special place where clinical engineers need to become part of the process. Clinical engineers should be able to monitor and track the performance of the software as a medical device in the clinical settings with real patients as it interacts with other medical devices or with the electronic health record. How easy is it to use, the usability of the software? And all of this should be reported to the authorities, to the software manufacturer, to the clinical directors in order to optimize the usability of this software as a medical device. If we want a self-driving car, we need to make sure that the safe driving car is safer than a human driver. Same thing with the software as a medical device, especially those class 3 and class 4. If we are transferring a clinical decision, both diagnostic or treatment, to a software, we better make sure that the software is conforming and compliant with everything we need it to do. And that is key for the clinical engineers. Next, Caliroy. Just really quick, because Steve already went over this, but software is becoming ubiquitous. We are having Internet of Medical Things devices all over the place, wearable devices, implantable devices, home care devices. They are being connected through non-secure channels, and the information needs to be forwarded to a clinical setting where a healthcare provider is going to make a decision. So how do we ensure that the data and the information that is flowing through these channels, it's clinically relevant, it's reliable, it is accurate? How do we know if those sensors are actually calibrated? So all of this are questions for the clinical engineer of the 21st century. Next, Caliroy. Same thing with the enabling environment. We know that most of the world is actually using desktop, laptop systems running Windows operating system. Windows, it's highly prone to viruses and every sort of cybersecurity threats and risks. So how do we support, how do we enhance the cybersecurity of all of these devices that are running in an inherently unsecure environment? How do we validate and verify that the data is safe, effective, and reliable so that we can actually make an action on top of it? Let's go to the next one, Khaled. This is very important. So now we are talking about the distributed healthcare, about the distributed hospital. Now we're talking about all of these pieces of software as a medical device residing on smartwatches, cell phones, laptops, tablets, shirts, pants, you name it. If these pieces of technology are part of a clinical decision support system, if we're using this software to monitor the health of a patient that is being hospitalized at home, how do we monitor all of these devices? How do we keep track of them in the inventory? How do we maintain them? How do we replace them? How do we calibrate them? How do we even know where they are? If the person is traveling and they're taking their medical device or their software as a medical device with them, and the software fails, how are we able to discover where in the world is this particular piece of software failing, and therefore how to intervene and correct the potential failure that could be life-threatening? Next one, Caliroy. Security. I cannot strengthen security. FDA has a stringent guidance regarding cybersecurity. HIPAA requires that all information for a software as a medical device needs to be encrypted at rest, needs to be encrypted in transit. No footprints must be left in any inherently unsecured device like a tablet, a laptop, a cell phone, or a smartwatch. So understanding how to deal with all of this cybersecurity and privacy constraints is fundamental for any clinical engineering profession migrating to this 21st century. Next one, Caliroy. The regulatory structure. There are multiple entities involved in software as a medical device, accreditation, validation, follow-up, post-market approval. We need to make sure that not only the software is secure, we'd also need to make sure that the software is compliant. For example, in the case of the software that I'm currently building, this particular piece of software not only needs to conform to the FDA requirements and regulations, to the HIPAA compliance, it is going to produce a report that needs to be used by the Occupational Health and Safety Organization, OSHA. So it also needs to conform to the requirements that OSHA requires. So next and last, Caliroy, like this cartoon says, I'm quickly becoming unemployable. I have been unemployed for 2 months, and all these IT jobs ask for knowledge of software I have never even heard of. This is the truth for software as a medical device, and this is the problem of the clinical engineer of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Amazing presentation as well. It's a pleasure to have listened all these, not just contents, but also trends and terrific in some way evolution for the different diversities, countries. We are listening you now. Terrific because challenges and goals are diverse as well. Let's go now. Let's move ahead with the Q&A, questions and answers. And before to start, because we have a number of them, let me give you kindly to you, Steve, and also to you, Ricardo, first petit avocado. For you, Steve, certainly the trends you have stated remark very well the need of training and certification as well for all our colleagues, clinical engineers, present and future. Knowing that this is not a standard among the world, the need of a training, a sustained training and certification is clear. In that regard, what do you think about the relevance and goals of networking with certain institutions, organizations from outside? We are talking now about developing countries, which has the same or more or less relevant needs on digital health solutions and efforts. For you, Ricardo, regulatory aspects are absolutely engaged in the development and improvement of health digital solutions. And again, this is not an issue well shaped, not even in the developed countries and in developing countries. What are your thoughts about regulatory goals regarding the software as medical devices? Now let's go to the questions also for our colleague, Steve. Steve, you have mine now, but also from Bucola, Engineer Bucola. How do you understand the challenge we have with cybersecurity and medical devices?
Well, certainly, we've been talking today of, focusing on digital health, and the reason we're doing that is because, as Ricardo has discussed and I alluded to, virtually everything, all technology we're dealing with, has got elements of digital, computer-based, software-based. It's got the digital elements in it. And cybersecurity is ensuring the integrity and the availability as well as the confidentiality of information. When it comes to quality healthcare and safe healthcare, integrity and availability are absolutely critical, and that's at the heart of cybersecurity. So as we migrate again into more and more digital devices, this is something that we need to take into consideration. It needs to play a major role, or clinical engineering needs to play a major role in this process of ensuring the integrity and the availability of that digital information. One of the challenges we've got is, well, a couple of challenges. One is that the professionals who traditionally have dealt with security, cybersecurity, folks in the information technology are often unfamiliar with the nuances associated with medical technology. And so they don't understand it. They don't often recognize the significance that the significant exposure that medical technology represents in healthcare organizations. And so we have to do a better job of educating and working with the folks in information technology and information security. And we need to acquire our own, skills. We need to understand again what are the implications. So I know that well, as you mentioned, one of the things that I'm doing with a colleague of mine, Axel Wirth, is we teach for graduate clinical engineers cybersecurity, and that's going to be something. And Amy, Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation, has got a course that Axel and I also put on. So you're going to see more of this sort of thing, and it will have to be the focus, no question. It will have to be pose a greater focus for clinical engineering services. Some significant amount of time in an effective clinical engineering service will have to be devoted to ensuring both the integrity and the availability of this digital health information that these devices increasingly produce and share.
Okay, let's go now to Ricardo. Ricardo, this is a question from Roberto Ayala, and he wants your opinion regarding the debate between EHR and EMR being understood as software as medical devices. What do you think about this discussion?
Good. So just to answer the question to Roberto and the rest of the team, an electronic health record and an electronic medical record in principle are considered an information repository, are considered a database that is used to store and retrieve clinical information. But the electronic health record in principle is not being used directly to provide a clinical actionable outcome. It's not the software that is creating a clinical outcome. However, if you add a clinical decision support system to an electronic health record, the clinical decision support system is a software as a medical device.
Mm-hmm. Clear. Let's go now to Steve. Steve, this is a question from our colleague Antonio Hernandez, and he wants your insights in the evolution of digital health. Could you comment on the health prevention and the rehabilitation programs, please?
Sure. In terms of health prevention, one of the promising aspects of digital health is the adoption of an increasing amount of artificial intelligence. One of the things that this will do in terms of the health prevention is, as we do a better job of acquiring data, health data associated with larger and larger patient populations, that gives us the ability to use artificial intelligence to go and look for patterns. If you say these people turned out to have pulmonary disease, these people turned out to be diabetics, go and look for common patterns. And you can, using artificial intelligence, go back in the evolution of their health and their care, and see what patterns, or what were the early signs, what were the patterns that began to lead them to, again, the conditions that they have. And in doing that, and then this is true of sentinel events, things like strokes and heart attacks would apply as well. By going back and looking at it, you can, in identifying patterns, you can prevent these occurrences, these diagnoses or these sentinel events from occurring if you've been able to identify a pattern and you've been able to intercede at a point where it takes less effort and it's less intrusive in their care. If you've done a good job of determining what are the factors, what are the trends that come together to lead to, again, a particular sentinel event like a heart attack or a stroke or a diagnosis like diabetes, you have the ability to, again, to go back and see what things, where can you make a difference and do it at a much, much earlier level. And in terms of the rehabilitation, as we do a better job also of collecting data, not just early on in the, throughout the healthcare process, but in terms of the patients who are going through or in need of rehabilitation, we've got the ability to better monitor through, systems that they wear, and basically provide them with the appropriate biofeedback to help ensure they're following the appropriate steps in terms of to help accelerate their rehabilitation or ensure they're doing it in a proper way. So again, this is all possible because we have the ability now to collect huge amounts of information across a wide swath of the patients, and using artificial intelligence, apply that to see again at what point we can intercede much earlier in the care process, as well as in the case of rehabilitation, be able to monitor it much more closely, much more effectively than we can with the discrete steps we're currently taking now, where we don't have constant access to this data.
Ricardo, we have here a comment from Jorge Cardoso, and he said, we must urgently reevaluate it as clinical engineers, as the digital technologies are going so fast in comparison to our current capacities. What do you think about this?
Absolutely. So we have discussed several times, and here we have the leaders of this group, Jadine, and I don't know if Tom is present, but I know that Jadine is here. We've talked several times about creating some sort of workshop or course on health information technology for clinical engineers. So I think we need to take that word and move forward with that. We've been doing several courses throughout the year. I think we need to formalize a formal course for the year 2022.
Thank you. Steve, this is a question from Luciano Gentile. Do you recommend to have at least one IT professional as a member of the clinical engineering staff?
I certainly would recommend that you have expertise that you can access, whether it be a liaise through IT or acquiring either IT people or IT skills within clinical engineering, because there is no question to effectively support these technologies we're dealing with, because they do incorporate, again, elements of information technology. The only way we can possibly be effective at doing this is to incorporate or at least collaborate with the people from IT, or incorporate these skills ourselves. And I think if I can just, someone had asked about being able to incorporating the or doing the IT. I think it is important. You probably will find people in clinical engineering specializing in areas like cybersecurity and in IT related skills. And so managing, for example, systems of systems, where you'll see other people perhaps specializing more in things like imaging systems, but you'll also see people specializing more in IT related things like managing systems of systems, which is again IT related.
Thank you. Ricardo, another question from Antonio Hernandez now. Are the algorithms or programs used to validate medical devices software included in the category of medical devices?
Okay, so the answer is yes and no. The software used for clinical trials, if you want to use a software to validate a clinical trial under CFR 21 of the FDA, that software needs to be validated and approved. So any software that is used to follow up a clinical trial needs to be validated and approved. The software per se needs to be validated against a comparator. A comparator is a technology that has been previously certified by the FDA to be safe and effective and therefore act as a reference. So in order to use the comparator could be another software, perhaps, but most likely the comparator is a standalone medical device. So what you're going to do is use statistical analysis, statistical tools to make sure that the performance of your standard and the performance of your software are significantly equivalent. That is the goal of the evaluation. If this is done through a software platform to control your clinical trial, this software transfer platform under CFR 21 needs to have been previously validated by the FDA.
Thank you. Well, this is the time for us to say that it was our pleasure to welcome all of you in this webinar. Today's webinar contributed to improve the quality of the clinical engineers' service to patients and to healthcare stakeholders, providing digital health contents, trends, evidences, and also the discussion included challenges from a global approach. We appreciate your attendance and look forward to meet you in the next GCA webinar. Be safe and keep making the difference, colleagues.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.